right, welcome everyone. It's great to have you here for this special Passive House Component Spotlight with Prosoco. I'm Zach Semke, I'm Director of Passive House Accelerator. I'm really happy you are here. Happy Thursday, and get ready to geek out on air barriers with Prosoco in a moment here. So Prosoco recently became a champion sponsor of the Accelerator, so we're very grateful for Prosoco's support. For nearly 20 years, Prosoco has been a pioneer in the science of air barriers and building envelopes, and made waves in 2005 with the advent of one of the first fluid-applied air and water barrier membranes on the market, Fast Flash. Not too long after that, Prosoco gained recognition for the removal of phthalates from Fast Flash. The reformulation would go on to allow the product to be used on what is perhaps the world's most famous building to employ passive strategies for ultra energy efficiency, Seattle's certified living building, the Bullitt Center, which I had the pleasure of working in for a few years. It's a great building. Not only was Prosoco one of the only manufacturers who removed phthalates from their formulation for this project, they were also the only manufacturer who made the formulation change permanent for Fast Flash and other silyl-terminated polymer formulations in the R-Guard line. Prosoco has continued to support project teams aiming for the highest energy efficiency standards, with both products to help make Passive House easier than ever to achieve, and technical reps in the field whose knowledge on building envelope details and assemblies has helped project teams achieve their desired airtightness and energy efficiency goals. Please welcome Dave Kimball, Pat Downey, Guy Long, and Paul Grahovac. Please take it away, Paul.
Well, thank you very much. And here's the team. Yours truly, Paul Grahovac, Code Standards and Testing, Dave Kimball, Chemistry, Coatings, Pat Downey, Doors and Window, especially Retrofits, and Guy Long, waterproofing envelope remediation and details. Having a little trouble getting Guy connected today, and if he doesn't come in, I'll speak in his place. We wanted to say a little bit about the other divisions or product lines of Prosoco. Various designers and contractors around the country know us for various things, but sometimes they don't know about the other. If you're sitting in an office building right now, for example, of masonry construction, there's a high probability that during new construction, the mortar clean down was handled with one of our products. And also a leader, possibly the leader in restoration cleaning, such as Grand Central Station, U.S. Capitol building, and such. Clear penetrating water repellents, finished concrete floors used as living and commercial space, air and water barriers, and construction anchors for new construction and restoration. These are the building envelope products, or the air and water barrier products. We have what I call the field of the wall coatings. We have the rough opening treatment, Fast Flash, and for accessories, for example, would be the air dam, which is a conventional sealant consistency, but formulated with the same silyl terminated polymer as the Fast Flash that lines a rough opening. I want to talk a little bit about our connection with Passive House over the years. And actually, Pat Downey was the first to get involved, so I handed over him, and I'll take it up when we hit 2014.
All right, thanks, Paul. Yeah, back in 2009, I believe it was the fall of 2009, we got a call from Joe Giampietro. I always have a hard time saying his name. I believe his daughter was working with our products on a project that she was involved with, and she told him about it. And so we had a meeting with Joe and a few other people, and basically the Mini B was the first project we got involved with for Passive House. And we went to the South Seattle Community College, the trade school there by Boeing Field, and we trained all of the people in that college, from Frank Masterbacher, his team, in application of the products, as well as testing and the science of our products. And then once that was built, it was moved up to Finney Ridge and put on display, and they did a blower door test, and it beat the Passive House numbers, I think by half, if I'm not mistaken. But it was a learning experience for all of us there.
And then the bullets center that Zach was discussing was about in the 2012 time frame. If you're not familiar with phthalates, the mouse you may have in your hand, the keyboard that is in front of you, basically anything that's plastic or polymer of any kind has been made with phthalates. My understanding is that in the construction industry, any kind of a membrane or coating that you may be using, sheet good or whatever, is made with phthalates. If you look on the SDF, the safety data sheet of the products you're using, and if you find anything about the word reproductive, having some kind of impact on reproduction, and that means human reproduction, then that's a reference to, likely a reference to phthalate content. And then since 2014, actually 2015, we've been a sponsor of Passive House Institute US. Of course, we recognize the importance of Passive House Institute with headquarters in Germany. And in fact, our related company that I also work for, BuildSmartNA.com, the prefabricated wall and window assemblies were certified Passive House by the PHI. And then what either is or was or is one of the largest Passive House apartment buildings in the world in the River Market area of Kansas City, Missouri, opened its doors, I believe, this summer. And that is insulated concrete walls, first cast in place and then precast later in the project, with huge Passive House windows, and the fast flash air dam combination was used to do that. I'll show you some test chambers where we tested out that system prior to the project continuing, and so forth up until the present day. We thought we'd kind of warm things up with some questions. And one is, what is this material, and is it proven technology? And it's been in use since 2005. In 2010, we sent a forensic architecture team into a window replacement project from 2005. It was performing fine, but we wanted to verify and document that the material looked and appeared to be in its original form and function. The materials around it were sound, and it was performing its intended function. And then after that successful report in 2010, 5 years out, we did the same thing in 2015. In 2005, I went on a 3-year tour and gave 120 air barrier presentations, and numerous times architects would say, it needs to have a 10-year history before I'll specify it. And certainly with the 2015 inspection, we satisfy that. We had intended in a 2021 timeframe to do the 15-year inspection, but as with a lot of things in that time period for a lot of people around the country, that has been delayed, but we hope to get to that soon. Another thing you can look for in proven performance is the good housekeeping seal of approval, if you will, from the International Code Council Evaluation Service, the ICC-ES, for products, virtually all construction products. The Code Council has a battery of tests specific to that type of product. And once a manufacturer satisfies the test and provides the test data, then the Code Council issues its report in support of using that material. And we have the appropriate reports, including the only Code Council report for fluid applied flashing that we're aware of at this time. You should ask manufacturers of all your products of any kind whether they have the ICC code report. I recall the late Wag Dionys, co-founder of the Air Barrier Association, once said, raised the question, do you realize the jeopardy you're placing architects in when you put products on the market that don't have an ICC-ES code report? And then another indicia, if you will, of proven performance to me is field performance. And this is a project I call the Accidental Passive House School. It's up in Washington State, 264,000 square feet. Those of you that are active in commercial construction are well aware that for the air barrier, you have either the option of following the code requirements for installing one, or to the satisfaction of the architect and inspector, or you can perform a blower door test. And most people don't do that. But this architect decided to do the right thing, and the code requirement is 0.4 CFM, which is 5 times leakier, if you will, than the Passive House Institute US standard of 0.08. But that was the goal, and that's what he or she set out to do. But when they did the first blower door test, they came up with 0.95, almost hitting the US Passive House requirement. They did no leak chasing whatsoever. And for those of you familiar with it, blower door testing, just a little bit of effort would no doubt have been enough to move them to 0.08. And as to the Passive House Institute standard of 0.6, you can see there that they beat that quite handily. And this is our largest hurricane and passive house test chamber. 17-foot long wall here on the left can test quite a different combination of windows and doors and penetrations. There's a 7x7 wall area on the other side. And then in this feature on the right, we have appended to the basic machine a 300-gallon surge tank, which can pretty much immediately deliver all of that water to the face of a wall assembly, as might a storm surge or a flood. And with the other equipment, very precise equipment attached to that, we can measure and time by the second how fast that wall assembly is wetting, how wet it's getting, and then turn on the air and the heat and see how fast it dries. And we call the goal here engineered drying, with the idea that, of course, we anticipate or hope that the building will always remain dry. But if there's a catastrophic event and the roof comes off, or the water floods in through the door or something, that the materials of construction would be able to recover based on the HVAC used as a tool to engineer dry, if you will. Best of our knowledge, we're the only ones in the world that are looking at that. And if anybody knows of anyone else who is or wants to know more about it, get back to us, because we'd like to collaborate on that. Is there a steep learning curve with extensive training and experience? I'll hand that over to Pat Downey.
Yeah, with everything, there's always tricks of the trade, and we come out, the reps, the tech team will come out to your projects and train your people. Normally, if you don't get trained, you end up struggling a little bit, but within a half hour to an hour, we can have the crew being very productive, showing them all the tools and the tricks of the trade, going through the process of different types of spreaders, rollers, chipper brushes, and all that kind of stuff. And then we'll actually keep coming to your project to maintain that train and inspect the buildings. But it actually is pretty simple, and that was one of the designs of the product. We wanted high performance. Where you saw the test chamber there, we have about 5 of them throughout the country, and we want to test stuff to failure. I'm from the window industry, and we always test stuff to pass. We wanted a different mindset because we want to make sure that the buildings with these materials would be able to handle severe weather. And so then the other combination was ease of application. You got to make the guy putting the product on there, guy or gal putting the product on there, a champion. And the more difficult your products are to apply, the less chance of success. So that was pretty much put in there. And we take this very seriously. We like to be on the job sites working with you. Dave, do you have anything to add to that?
Thank you, Pat. I would concur with that. Interestingly enough, I was just on a job site yesterday in Wilmington, North Carolina. Just a gorgeous single-family home being built. But so we were doing some training, and the guy that we were working with, I mean, instantly just understood the simplicity of the system and applied the material perfectly, essentially with very little instruction. It's very user-friendly. It's very intuitive for a lot of people that have even the slightest bit of construction experience. So I think that's one of the huge positive components of these materials. Thanks.
Thanks. Number 3, is the system cost competitive? We did what we call a bake-off. We erected 2 identical wall assemblies with rough openings, and we set 2 experts in one expert in the application of peel and stick to rough openings, and another familiar with our product. And we found that we were 35% faster. And then some other studies have been done on fluid applied and building wrap, and find that over the entire building, that fluid applied tends to be about 3 times faster. And so what we see often are contractors substituting us or offering us as substitutes for peel and stick and building wrap. And last time I checked, contractors don't do things to increase their costs of doing business. What should you expect from a manufacturer? This is a part that I look to Guy Long, but having trouble getting him on, so I'm just basically going to speak to it. I've been very impressed with this over the years. I had a colleague at another company say to me that it's difficult to get details from his company, or suggested details, because of the liability issues, and when he can get them, it'll be a month or more. And I think we turn these around oftentimes in 24 hours. It's a service we offer free of charge. Basically take a set of drawings and mark them up to give confirmation about which product goes where and in what sequence and such. And Guy Long is a career waterproofing consultant, and has done forensic work and construction consulting all his life before coming with Prosoco, and these are found to be quite useful. As Pat indicated, we make sure the contractors are trained. We fully support whatever performance requirements are being imposed on the project, and we offer also something called the Promise Program, where if the project will engage with us and one of the consultants we work with around the country, will actually give an extended warranty for even more peace of mind. Number 5, could you please elaborate on how we can introduce fresh air to the building interior with lower impact to costs? What this is all about is that sort of in the middle of the pandemic time, if we can identify a middle, knock on wood, we're coming to the end of it. But, I became curious, as everyone did, about all things coronavirus, and started to do some research, and frankly was motivated by an informational email that came across as part of the sort of mass mailings that we get. And I apologize to the author, I can't recall them, but some passive house consultants in the East Coast had identified a study that talked about a connection, or an equivalency, if you will, between increasing what HVAC people call the outdoor air component of the HVAC circulation mix, about an equivalency between that and vaccination. And at that time, vaccination was just a hope. And so I plowed into that and did a lot of research and wrote a paper for the International Institute of Building Envelope Consultants, and then a shorter one on a similar subject matter for Building Owners Management Association. The first one was called Building Science Helps Defeat Coronavirus, and the second was called The Great Fresh Air Competition. And the theme is that coronavirus, building envelope, HVAC, and outdoor air are all subjects that we shouldn't just leave to the HVAC experts and the infectious disease experts. The citations show that they're well aware of the benefits of increasing outdoor air, but in my opinion, there was not enough being said about that to the building owner community or to the public in general. And so I won't go any further into it, but if you bring in addition, many people, including myself, have concluded that our buildings are terribly underventilated, meaning lack outdoor air in the HVAC mix, and this is done to reduce energy consumption. But that amount of outdoor air can be significantly increased. Prosoco ran 25% outdoor air from the outset without even knowing that it might that had been proven to be helpful, just using common sense, and they continue to run it to this day. And many experts, in my understanding, would say that that's too high for comfort, it's too high for the building to tolerate, and I think we need to challenge that. So the bottom line is it does cost more money to condition that air, cool it or heat it. But if you have a tight building envelope, say to passive house air tightness standards, in new construction or through a retrofit, you can save a lot of money, which then can be put toward conditioning that additional air. Also, the mechanism of the air ameliorating the coronavirus is a process of dilution and removal, and it depends on airflow being in line with what the HVAC designer anticipated. And if you have a leaky building envelope and stagnant areas of air that are not being moved, then the whole thing kind of falls apart. So there's a major contribution to be made. In fact, I think one of the affiliates of Passive House Institute made that a theme of one of their annual conferences a year back or so, and I commend them for that. Anyway, that's what that's all about. Are there compatibility issues with Prosoco products and other products? Pat, you want to take a shot at that one?
Yeah, I was going to actually bring Dave in because he is a chemist.
Okay.
But yeah, the products, just let me chime in a little bit, were designed to be a retrofit at the beginning when they were developed. And when you're doing retrofits, you're running into stuff you don't know what's there. You're not sure what that material is, especially a 80-year-old project. So we didn't want to have any solvents in it or isocyanates. Dave, why don't you take it from there?
Sure. I would back up first and help people understand what we mean by compatibility. So in the industry, there are two basic things that people think about when they think about compatibility. One is compatible from a chemistry standpoint. Do they get along or do they consume each other or something like that? But a lot of people think of compatibility as adhesion, right? Strictly by ASTM testing measurements, those two are not related from that standpoint, but the industry and people out there kind of think of both of those when they talk about compatibility. Most of the, when you consider the construction world, most of the stuff that we have out there, and by the way, I have a whole AIA approved presentation called the alchemy of architecture. If you're interested in that, that basically goes through what I'm going to talk about here in the next few seconds. And that is, let's talk about what we deal with: concrete, steel, aluminum, glass, and then lots of miscellaneous things like roofing products and gaskets for window systems and sealants and all those other types of things. So, but the first ones I mentioned, concrete, glass, aluminum, steel, are all what a chemist would call inorganic. Organic means that at one point in time it was alive. So it was a dinosaur, or it was a palm tree, or it was one of Pat's ancient relatives, right? So organic means that it was alive. Inorganic means it was never alive. So concrete was never alive. Steel was never alive. Aluminum, glass, never alive. These are all inorganic materials. And so when we talk about compatibility and getting along, the inorganic materials have to get along with the organic materials. So what are the organic materials? Anything basically made from crude oil. That could be a spun-bound polyolefin. It could be an EPDM or neoprene gasket. It could be a urethane sealant. It could be a butyl or acrylic sealant or coating or compound or those sorts of things. So there's those are the real basics of compatibility. And then of course, I always said about adhesion is if it doesn't stick, then what's the point, right? You might as well use bubble gum, although bubble gum adheres pretty well for a little while. So the real point here when we're talking about silo terminated polymers, and again, I don't want to go too deep into chemistry or too long, but the silo terminated polymers are actually a hybrid. They're a combination of the silicone end, the silyl end of the molecule, ends of the molecule, and the organic or midsection, if you will, or middle of the molecule. So you get the best of both worlds, compatible with inorganic materials like silicones and concrete and steel and aluminum and glass and all those sort of things, but also compatible and gets along with the organic material. So it's kind of it's that ambassador in between all those materials, and that's one of the real specialities of the silo terminated polymer chemistry that brings to the table. But I think I probably have taken long enough, Paul. Thanks.
No, that's good stuff. Thanks. Number 7. Can you please talk a little bit about how to introduce an air barrier in the negative side of the exterior building wall? Well, this falls squarely in the expertise of Guy, who's not been able to join us. I'm going to kick it off a little bit and then kick it around, if you will. But basically here you're looking at this is the context it comes up in is masonry buildings where it's been determined not to remove the cladding or not to cover up the cladding, but instead to produce an air barrier system on the interior of the wall. And I will hand it over pretty quickly because this is more field oriented than I normally get. But it's very important to address the voids and such and the connection areas. I guess Pat's and David, well, I know they've done much more of this, but I'll hand it over to Pat first.
Yeah, we've done quite a few, and they don't want to change the exterior look of masonry building. And so we've gone in and we make sure we review the interior, make sure the mortar's good. They might have to repoint. If there's paint on there, we want to do adhesion testing. And then we go in there, make sure everything's looking good. If there's any efflorescence or anything like that, make sure it's cleaned. If it's loose paint, make sure it's cleaned. And then you apply our Cat 5 system, STPE products and detail components. And then you want to make sure that if it's CMU or split face or what have you, that you also put a sealer on the exterior. And of course, it has to be capped, which they normally are. But you put a sealer on the exterior so you don't have rainwater getting in there and you have a freeze thaw that can damage the mortar. And then detailed down into the few projects I've done, they actually put studs on the inside, spray foam possibly, or rigid insulation over the Cat 5 system and insulate it from that side. And it's we've done several schools in the Northwest that way, old schools, and other military buildings with great success. You do change the dynamics a bit, and you do need to, if there's rebar in that wall system, you do need to protect that. You don't want it to rust Again, that's where you're putting the air barrier on the inside and then a water repellent on the outside to keep bulk water from getting in there. David, you want to take it away?
Sure, happy to. Because of where I live in this little town called Brooklyn, New York, you probably never heard of it. I work up and down the East Coast, and the East Coast of the United States is where the oldest buildings, I think few would argue, exist in the country, because that's where we kind of started out. But so we've done a lot of these negative side air barriers, really from Baltimore all the way up the coast into Boston and et cetera. And yes, it's correct. It's because of the Historical Preservation Society and groups like that. You can't rip off the exterior facade. That just wouldn't be possible. And so if you're trying to improve the air barrier performance of the wall, the thermal performance of the wall in general, then you really only have one choice, and that is to go inside and do the negative side air barrier. And as Pat mentioned, you do have to be careful about the building science component of what you're doing. But all of those things are pretty easy to calculate and build around with the right specialists and that sort of thing. Also, the thing about the Cat 5 that Pat mentioned on the negative side, again, whether it's a CMU or it's precast or whatever the wall might be, you really don't want to trap water in that wall. So having a moisture vapor permeable product like Cat 5 there is the correct approach. Also, the difference between Cat 5 and most of the other fluid applied air barriers on the market is that it is STP based chemistry, meaning that it cures by moisture. And even when you initially put it on the wall, before it's cured out, it is not just water resistant, it's waterproof. So any water, liquid or vapor that's coming through the CMU and coming in contact with the Cat 5 can permeate out because of the moisture vapor permeability of the Cat 5, but also it's not going to do anything to the Cat 5 because the Cat 5 is waterproof, not just water resistant. Okay, so that's why we only choose to use Cat 5 on that negative side, and why, frankly, it works. Now, back to the compatibility thing, Pat mentioned doing insulation going toward the inside, so you're insulating up against the Cat 5. And we have many projects where the spray foam was used, or rock wool or something like that was used in mineral wool, and have very good success with that. It dramatically improves the performance of the building, and as Pat mentioned, also using the accessory components, the fast flash, joint seam filler, air dam, all those sort of things, obviously contribute to that performance as well. But yeah, I would caution, this is not something that we just say go forth and go forth and prosper. We want to have at least one member of the technical team involved in all of these negative side air barrier applications, just because it's not simple run-of-the-mill everyday kind of applications. It does require some extra looking at penetrations that are coming through the wall, and just the whole building science component of it. We need to make sure that we do our due diligence in evaluating the wall and make sure that our product is the right one to use in that application. So we encourage you to contact one of us and go through it that way. And I guess probably at some point we'll have somebody jump in and talk about how to get to contact the Prosoco people for follow-up after this, but certainly the website, prosoco.com, or our customer care group, or whatever it is that other mechanisms to get to us. But we're here, we're ready, we're happy to help in any way that we can. And I think that's probably enough for that, Paul. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I wanted to cap that with one thing. It's a data point that many of you may well be aware of, but for those of you that are not, I think it's useful. There's a 2005 study, air barrier study, airtightness study by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And by my calculations, what they found was, looking at the existing building stock for office buildings, is that comparing the average infiltration or leakage to the current passive house standards, the standards are 15, that is 13, 14, 15 times tighter than those buildings are, or at least were in 2005. I don't think they got any tighter in the meantime. So what I'm trying to say is there's might well be some low-hanging fruit out there in terms of energy efficiency. You know, some great studies are out there on improved cognition, vastly improved cognitive performance from increasing the outdoor air, which again is facilitated by tightening up that building envelope. Okay, so I think it goes back to Zach and some Q&A.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, all of you. This is a really great presentation, and we do have a number of questions, so I want to dive into that. So let's start with Lance White. You had a question about better products than standard 10 mil.
I live in north central Alberta, so we live, and it's basically a desert, and it's cold, and we have shortly after the Second World War, we had a housing boom here because we had oil boom also, and we have a great deal of houses that have great bones that need a complete retrofit externally. What we like to do is to strip everything down to the bare bones, basically the exterior sheeting before there's anything, any barriers on it. My question is, why should I specify something better than a 10 mil standard polyethylene and taped off with proper tape?
I'd like to give sure, thanks. I'd like to give that the first shot anyway, and that is, for insulation to work properly and have its specified R value, you need an airtight building envelope. The R value test is done on an airtight lab bench assembly, and to achieve that, you can achieve that with building wrap, but it's highly labor intensive to achieve, and the quality control has to be very good. And so as Pat told me in preparation for this, where they want a good air barrier job, that's when the contractors substitute our system, because they don't want to wrestle with doing it with building wrap. Dave Kimball, you want to address any of that?
Yeah, I would jump in and say, you know, one of the things that people kind of don't really understand, and this is back to that adhesion conversation, is that adhesion occurs at a microscopic scale. So even a nice smooth piece of painted aluminum or something like that, and I don't know how many can see my screen, but I'm holding up my hand and spreading my fingers apart a little bit. And you could do that too if you like, but adhesion occurs at a microscopic scale. So microscopically, the substrate looks like your four fingers of your hand spread apart. So when you bring in and these wrap systems are really reliant upon tape for the seams to keep that going. And when you put a tape on this substrate, it's basically like putting your hand over top of your fingers. So you get adhesion at the tips of your fingers, but not down in the little valleys. Whereas the fluid applied, when you tool it into that, you force intimate contact of the sealant material with all those little valleys, and you get tremendously better, not only short-term, but long-term adhesion. And if things don't stick, if that tape loses adhesion in the wall, then you really don't have your airtight system anymore, right? The other thing about a lot of the membranes is they're not self-sealing in any way, shape, or form. When you put that material up, and then you come along and poke a bunch of holes in it with your brick ties or Z-girts or whatever you're using, you're poking a million holes in it with your exterior insulation ties and that sort of thing. You're poking thousands and maybe millions of holes into that, and it's no longer an air barrier, and frankly it's no longer even a liquid water barrier because it's got all these holes in it. So those are the things that I would say why the fluid applieds, particularly the fluid applieds like Prosocos that have proven performance in self-sealing kinds of conditions, are really far superior, not just in the short term, but also in the long term. I mean, you're trying to improve these good boned older buildings, their thermal performance, but you're not wanting to do that for 5 years or 10 years. You're wanting to do it for 50 years or 100 years, right? So you use materials that have proven performance and really check off all the requirements for that sort of thing. And again, happy to talk to you about that in greater detail individually, if you like. So,
Hey,
thank
Pat, thanks. Pat, you have had a career doing window replacements and working for a building facade repair contractor. Any thoughts?
Yeah, and it's just, I started doing windows in the early 90s, and we just slapped the window in and then taped around it. And then, of course, the first person called to a leak in a building is the window guy, because water's always there. And then we started using pans. Pans were fine. Actually helped divert the water out if the window started leaking. But we would get, when we would do testing, I'd be brought onto a project saying, hey, your window's leaking. And it would be up to me to test the window to make sure my window is not leaking. And I would prove that. And if I didn't have the install contract, I would try to walk away, because we found out that building paper mislapping, as Joe Steebrook says, this is proper, this is future money. Basically, we found mislaps, the building paper tearing, and it would, when the building would go negative or the wind would blow up against the building, the water would come in and around our window and on the floor. If I did have the install contract, the company I worked for in early 2000s, before I joined Prosoco, we actually started doing more peel and stick, and then we got into the liquid in 2006, because we wanted something that was intimately bonded to the substrate and then bonded to our window with a sealant joint on the interior. That way, when people started pointing fingers, I was protecting my window and my window rough opening, so I wouldn't have any leaks there. And a lot of times it was a through wall exhaust vent that was leaking, ending up on top of my window or in the rough opening and then leaking down through the wall. So that would negate them coming at me with a lawsuit. So the other thing with building paper is if you're trying to do a blower door test, one of the biggest issues we found is people are trying to make sure that tape stuck, or if they have a tear here, and you're spending a lot of labor after the fact trying to find out where all those leaks are. As Dave Kimball says, water is the best wayfinder. Wherever air goes, water can go. And just because you're getting a leak out a window doesn't mean the leak came in from the outside 10 feet away. So intimately bonding a membrane or liquid into the rough opening and then bonding it to the window and door, that's a game changer and stops failures.
Okay, Zach, back to you.
All right, great. So I think up next we have Daniel Clark. And Daniel, I think you may have had a couple of questions, so go ahead and fire them off.
Okay, number one question was masonry retrofit. So you mentioned the sealer going on the front side. It's going to wear away. There's going to be incomplete seal coverage. So I'm curious what kind of studies you might have done to find out, once there is a bit of water that makes its way into the masonry, how much vapor pressure can that Cat 5 take? And the other question, easy one, I guess, is between this and some of the other liquid applied air barrier, what's really the difference?
Let me take a shot at both of those first. As to testing, the closest thing I can think of that might be satisfactory for your review is something that was done by the Northwest Masonry Association, where they, I don't want to put words in their mouth and I don't have it in front of me, but my definite recollection is that they confirmed that it was an appropriate material for the blindside application we're talking about. And then the difference is that I think we're the only, well, we are one of the few, maybe one other one that I can think of, that has an uncut, and that is a silo terminated polyether product that's not cut with solvent that you can spray. You know, these products can go on we say a damp surface. It can be quite damp, and it can be rained on immediately. And unless it's silo terminated polymer, it can't do that. Have I addressed those adequately, Dave and Pat, or would you like to comment on any of them?
Yeah, if you're able to dig up that study from the Masonry Association, that would be great.
Yeah, Zach, how can I get back to this individual? How am I mechanically here?
Yeah, no, yeah, please. So I will share my email address in chat, and just email me the request, and I'll get it connected. So before I share my email address, we should get to the next question. This is actually not a question, but I thought Dan, you might want to Dan Levy, you might want to come on and share.
So thank you, great presentation. I know most of the people at Prosoco. I met Paul Grahovac many years ago in Washington, D.C. when he gave a presentation for a Passive House group. And I asked him about whether there was any application for these products on masonry, which wasn't part of his talk. And he answered it referring to CMUs. And then I went up to him later thinking there's no way he's going to know what autoclaved aerated concrete is. But I was looking for sealants to use with an autoclaved aerated concrete structure. And he knew exactly what it was. He knew how to build with it. He knew how it was produced. These guys are on top of things. So I used their products. They work great. They gave me all the technical support anyone could ask for. And they even came out and did a demonstration of the products at my house for a group of others. And among that group was one of the presenters was Dave, who just spoke. So I just wanted to say that these guys are great and the products are great. So you get real support from them.
Thanks. Appreciate the support comment.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, so up next is Reed Rollins. Reed, I don't think you've been answering some questions, but I just wanted to give you a moment to share whatever you'd like to offer.
Sure. Obviously a big fan of the Prosoco and the company themselves, for that matter. They're a great team to deal with. One, I guess maybe for Dave, the pull test. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? I mean, we do them here, but you can do those in the field by yourself. If you could elaborate a little bit on how someone could do it.
Sure, absolutely. Prosoco kind of came up with this approach to do field testing, and Paul Grahovac was intimately involved in the development of this test. But it's very simple. You just take a washer, typical washer with a hole in the center, and you glue it to a substrate. Actually was in Wilmington, North Carolina this morning, and doing a couple of those just turns out as well. It's really, really simple. That your typical washer calculates out, and you can do the math calculating the area of the washer that you glue onto the wall. But it's typical, most of the washers are typically about 1 square inch calculation. And then we just have a very high performance magnet that attaches to a luggage scale, like you buy it Bed Bath & Beyond or whatever, and you just you pull on that thing and you get to 20 pounds of force, and that calculates to 20 psi. And the ABAA, the Air Bearer Association of America, requires a 16 psi performance test in order to be considered having good adhesion. It's a remarkably simple, inexpensive. The parts are less than $50. And you just super glue that washer to the wall. You wait a few minutes for it to cure out, and you come back and you do the test. And it's very easy and very simple. The only thing I would caution people, as you have that luggage scale in front of you and you're pulling on it, you want to move your face off to the side, so if it pops off, you don't whack yourself in the head. That's the only safety precaution I would add. But is that what you were looking for, Reed?
Yeah, did you learn that trick the hard way?
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to add to that just a little bit. I did identify the need for an inexpensive substitute or something that would be a screener for an ASTM D48541 pull test with those expensive units and operators that come with that test. And it was Ron Tatley, the co-inventor of the fluid applied flashing and the designer and fabricator and operator of those elaborate test chambers, who actually identified the parts and pieces and how to use them. And if you'll send in an email into Zach, you can be provided with a parts list and a video and information about how you can assemble one of those yourself and start using it.
Great, thanks. Okay, so next up is Devin Basher. Devin, you had a couple questions.
Hi, thank you very much for this presentation, and I'm curious about the suitability of cellulose-based fiberboard like Homosote as a substrate for Prosoco.
I'll give a preliminary response in that, which is that I don't know. We're looking very close at wood fiber insulation at BuildSmart, but I do know that the products are used on lumber, OSB, and plywood. And if Pat or Dave want to address this particular substrate, that'll be fine.
Yeah, I would like to get more information on that sheathing and then do some testing. I'm working with a few different fiber boards, ox board.
That's right, yeah.
And with the price of lumber, OSB being up to $75 a sheet back in the day, earlier this year, and issues with that. Other companies are coming out with different boards, and we're trying to test everything. Along with that question before yours and stated here is that if you're not testing, you're guessing. That's our motto. So if you could contact me with that information, I would go get some of that board and we would actually start doing some testing. We want to make sure there's some exterior gyp boards several years ago that were soaking up liquids, primers, and all that. There's one board, I won't name the board, but manufacturers that use primers, you'd have to do 3 coats. And I remember getting the call that, hey, Pat, your Cat 5 soaking into this board. And I thought, there's no way Cat 5 is soaking into this board. Sure enough, it was soaking up. The matrix of the fiber on the gyp board was really wide, and you could actually pour water through it. It would just leak right through the board. So they've tightened it up since then, but there's issues. So yeah, I'd be interested in getting a sample of that board.
Thank you very much. It's mostly for retrofit. So this would be testing a piece of it on the building, or potentially removing a piece of it and trying it, something like this. I'm also curious about generally the application methods, like airless sprayer or power rolling, and also the gaps that can be, or depth and width of gaps that can be accommodated reliably. And one more thing, same material to go from like masonry to like cycloelastic, like wood or OSB or plywood? Is it the same material?
It's the same polymer. We have a product called joint and seam filler, where we took up fibers and we chopped it up and put it inside it. It's our product to deal with seams and the movements of inside, outside corners, transitions from your sheathing down to your footing, through wall flashing, so on and so forth. So it's a combination. The Cat 5 takes a big pump, but you can use power rollers. We have guys using power rollers as well. You just need to keep it warm. You don't want to try to put it on at 30 degrees. You can put it on at 30 degrees, but the material needs to stay warm.
Is that the bare, what is the material? Is there a substrate limit on the temperature, low temp for the material in the substrate?
It has to be frost free. I have guys up in Big Sky putting material on at 9 degrees Fahrenheit. And then they actually spray it with water to make it cure, because the Cat 5, our system, when you go below freezing, it just stops curing, but you don't have a chemistry change. And once you start inducing moisture and heat, then it starts doing its cross-linking and will cure. But you do need to induce its moisture cured, so you need to introduce moisture to it.
So it is able, you airless sprayer is a way to move it, to apply it.
Yeah, but it's a big pump. It's below grade guys pumps, $10,000 pumps, not a standard one you get at Home Depot.
Yeah. And what size thank you. What size gaps and depths can be accommodated
Well,
reliably?
the joint and seam can pretty
Yeah.
much do almost anything except for once you get past an inch, you want to scab something in there. But yeah, we've had that up to an inch, 3/4 of an inch with baccarat in there, so you're not wasting material.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, then we have a cured silicone for larger gaps as well, or for seismic movement. And it's basically we have an STP product called SureSpan adhesive that you adhere that to the substrate. So if you're doing any seismics or anything like that, where are you located?
Well, right now I'm primarily in the East Coast of the U.S.
Oh, okay. Well, I cover the whole Western U.S. from Denver to Hawaii, Mexican border, all the way through Canada. So, and then Dave's on the East Coast.
Awesome.
So we can help you out.
Great. So just briefly, if you're moving from masonry to wood, like in a residential application, for example, there would be a seam, two or three different materials would be used for that.
No, just you'd put some baccarat in there if you have a gap, and then joint and seam over that. And then either the Cat 5 air barrier or fast flash, which is our rough opening prep.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great.
Thanks, Devin. So next up is Derek Cowburn, who is, I think he's in China, and it is late. So I think he may still be with us.
It's really late.
All right, Derek.
I'm sorry. I just love these events, and sometimes they don't jive with my calendar year. But the question I had actually was around heat and such. There's a lot of these little LED lights nowadays that are really small point sources, and so they're getting kind of hot. And I was just wondering, because they warm up, cool down, hundreds of times in their lifespan, if that temperature change will have any kind of effect, or if there's any kind of a special treatment that people should do around them. They're also being applied into walls and strip formats, things like that. So I guess the question is around, like, does heat cycling have any effect, and is there any treatment they should do to deal with that?
So far, we've done testing at 250 degrees, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Nothing specific to the particular application. I would not be concerned about it myself. Any other comments, Mr. Kimball?
I would jump in and say, just from a chemistry standpoint, and Paul mentioned a nice number there, 250 is a pretty conservative number. The chemistry certainly should handle 300 degrees Fahrenheit on a pretty much continuous basis and not be too much bothered by that. And probably if you've got 300 or even 250 on a continuous basis, you probably got a lot of other things to worry about than the
yeah, bigger problems. That's right. Yeah. No, I won't go anywhere near that, but that's good to know. Well, thank you guys.
Thanks.
Thanks, Derek. Have a good sleep. Okay, so next up is Daniel DeWitt.
So I live, thanks for the presentation. It was really useful. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and we have a lot of demand for very contemporary, minimal, custom bathroom shower installations. I was curious, so this is probably a question for David. He described the masonry compatibility of Cat 5 of, the product sticking to masonry. I was wondering if there's anything like how well masonry would stick to the product, and if you would recommend having this extra layer of redundancy behind the plastered surface as an extra waterproofing element within a bathroom installation.
Well, very interesting, Daniel. Thank you for that. Actually, I'll be in Asheville toward the end of March for the Waterproofing Contractors Association meeting. Anyway, as it turns out, as I wanted to build a shower in my basement, I built the walls, of course, and installed the cement board, and then I coated the cement board with fast flash, which is the same chemistry as the Cat 5, just a thicker, more sealant consistency material. And then I adhered all the tile to the fast flash with more fast flash. And then I went in and mortared it with just regular, grout in between the all the little tiles and things. And that was I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. And of course, literally because of the fast flash and it's being waterproof, not just water resistant, you could seal up the door and fill the thing full of water if you wanted to, and it wouldn't go anywhere. So I don't know. It's a great question. Bathtubs and showers and that sort of thing is not something that we typically, a path that we've typically, Prosoco has chosen to go down, I would say, yet. But I think it's pretty cool stuff for that sort of application, and I certainly have some proven performance in my own basement.
So the grout successfully stuck to the fast flash, but you use that as the adhesive for holding on the tile. So you don't have there's no like material precedent for just a regular like Portland cement, or gypsum based product to sticking to the fast flash.
Well, yeah, I apologize. I didn't completely answer your question. So we have lots of experience with stucco going directly to the Cat 5 because it's what's on the barrier wall. It's kind of an interesting application. It's another one of those like the negative side Cat 5 application, negative side air barrier, where we do require us to be actively engaged and involved that because there is a primer called Stucco Prime that is used for that to give you just great grip of depth adhesion of the cementatious material to the Cat 5 or fast flash or whatever it might be. So it certainly can be done, and happy to talk to you about it in greater detail whenever you want. So yeah, thank you. Great question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. So we have a question coming up from Kevin Brennan. Before it's the last question. Last but not least, Kevin is the co-host of Construction Tech, so it's great to have him here. I want to just let people know that if you still have a question, or if for some reason I inadvertently missed you, please pose it in chat now so we don't miss it. And with that, if Kevin, you're still on, why don't you come on and pose your question?
Hey, what's up, Zach?
Hey, Kevin.
Thanks for having me on. And my question was, which actual spray machine do you guys recommend just to do the spray Cat 5? How big of a machine? What number or what brand?
You can use a Graco 833 or 933, which those are the ones that the spray applicators like the best. And it's actually all that information is on our data sheet. And I can't remember what the Titan brand is, just off the top of my head, but we do have that information. It's on our website as well. If you go to the data sheet, I think it's page 4 on the data sheet.
But those are all gas powered machines. You don't have any electric machines, right?
Not that I'm aware of. Dave, do you know?
I don't specific about that, but I would say that the pumps that we have tested are all in the Cat 5 product data sheet, and the correct nozzle sizes and all those and pressures and gallon per minute flow rates and all those. It's all in the product data sheet, so that should help you get to where you need to get.
We have found the manufacturers to be very eager to help with a question like you have. So I would contact them and make reference to those machines and the question of electric and see what they come up with.
Yeah, and just to clarify on the spray machines, there's companies out there, we call them the Me Too's, that said, oh, you can spray it. And people tried to spray STP technology, and then they would clean their hoses out with water, which cures it. And then they end up throwing away a $10,000 machine. For Prosoco, we wanted to figure it out to make sure it could actually be done. So we contacted the spray companies. We contacted companies that's what they do, below grade materials. And we worked with them to figure it out. So we have the proper machines, the tips, and how you clean it. And the one thing with our Cat 5 system is that if you're spraying, I had 2 guys say, hey, I'm just going to leave this in my machine overnight. Well, you can do that with an acrylic. You can't do that with an STP because it's an adhesive technology and it'll cure within the machine if any moisture gets in there. And so we've detailed it down to where almost idiot proof. You still have to have a guy who knows what he's doing, but we try to hit every element that could happen and hurt the end user. We want to make sure he's going to be a champion.
Thanks, Pat. What do you guys use to pull through the machine? Mineral spirits,
Yes.
I think? Okay.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kevin. Okay, so we do have some more questions now. So Kyle Hayes, do you want to pose yours?
Sorry, I was driving. Hey, I'm doing a remodel of a 100-year-old house in San Antonio, Texas, and it's got no moisture barrier, and it went through a weatherization program down here, so they filled the walls with rock wool, but no moisture barrier, so there is some rot happening with the shiplap. So I wanted to apply a air moisture barrier on the outside of the siding. And I was seeing what Prosoco product could do that and be like UV protected or painted.
So it's going to be fully exposed?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't really have anything for it. And what's the cladding?
It's wood side. It's the it's a shiplap with the kind of beveled siding look on there. I forget exactly what it's called.
Yeah, we're really not going to have anything in our arsenal for that. I mean, I've had a job where they actually put Cat 5 on the cladding, and then there's a lot of detailing, unfortunately. And then we came to is that why don't you just put some OSB, put a coating on it, put OSB, or not a coating, put OSB on it, detail that, and then you put your cladding over that. They actually ended up doing a rain screen system.
Yeah, I was trying to avoid having to remove all of the cladding that's there. So like I was looking for a way to either, go through and detail or caulk all the seams, or just like a sprayed on or rolled on product is really what I was hoping for.
Well, yeah, if you're going to clad over it, you could do that, but you can't.
Oh, no. I'm trying to save it. It's a historical home.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it's over 100 years old. So it's that I'm trying to add a moisture barrier to it, and I've been trying to figure that out. So
I did have a job in was it Santa Cruz, where it was historical on one facade.
Yeah.
And they actually went in and applied products to the negative side of the wood. And the big thing there was that we're not protecting the exterior. But it was an old place. I think it had maybe one layer of felt. And I'm not sure exactly how it finished off. But that was not the right way to do it, but they're trying to, because it was historic, trying to keep the exterior the same. But that was one way. I don't think I'd recommend that application, but
like I'm trying to work on these older houses and make sure we add the right layers without destroying the integrity of the house. So
Great, thanks, Stephen. Okay, so next up is John Horton.
Yeah, I'm just we're looking at putting an addition on a pretty good size addition using ICF, and I'm wondering about these products for the exterior on the blocks.
Yeah, Dave, I don't know which of you are most familiar with ICF. I know there's been a bunch of schools in Florida that have used our product on ICF. I don't know which one of you to hand it to talk about it. All I know is that it's being used for that purpose.
Absolutely, lots of ICF jobs up and down the East Coast.
Okay.
Typically, we say Cat 5 is the best choice there because generally Cat 5 you don't have to address the seams between the panels of the ICF panels. You can just coat right over it. You can usually they put wood bucks in the rough openings, and then you can fast flash that all up and tie into the air barrier coming along on the outside. The only thing I would say about the ICF is that it needs to be properly cleaned because of the oxidation of the foam. And we have several procedures that folks have worked out. You can power wash it, or you can give it a good scrub and then a wash down and that sort of thing. Dry it off with a leaf blower or something like that is typically the most recommended approach. But lots of others too, as long as you're getting it clean and because it's back to that that old scenario that people always, when I gave sealant presentations, I would ask, why is it that we clean? And people would answer, well, because the sealant won't adhere to the dirt. And I said, no, you're wrong. The sealant adheres to the dirt just fine. The dirt doesn't adhere to the underlying substrate. And that's the case for the ICF. The Cat 5 or the Fast Flash or whatever will adhere to the oxidized layer of the foam. It's just that that oxidized layer is a politician. It has no integrity, right? And so push comes to shove, and it pulls free, right? It doesn't adhere to itself, is what it amounts to. But we do have a special Cat 5 version called Cat 5 ICF. So yeah, it's used extensively around the country, but a very good performing system, by the way. ICF, I like it a lot.
And so on the oxidation layer, is that something resulting from long-term exposure, months-long exposure of
surprisingly short exposures?
Yeah, it's a matter of a few days. Yeah.
Surprisingly short exposure. You should confer with us offline as you go down that road.
And who would I contact for that?
Where are you again?
Richmond, Virginia.
That'd be me, Dave Kimball. It's just dave.kimball@prosoco.com.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Sure, thank you.
Thanks, John. Okay, next up is Dan Pachi.
I have a question about my 30-year-old log house, and I'm preparing to replace all the windows and doors. And I want to consider using Prosoco products for the preparation of the window opening, door openings. So if you tell me if it's suitable for that, that would be great.
Yes, it is. Do you have wood bucks in that, or how is it detailed, the rough opening?
Basically the vertical sides of the log opening. In the center of the diameter of the log vertically, there's a recess into the log. Then it's kind of like a two 2x4s in a T shape. The one side of the T is forced into the log, so that's the buck, basically.
Yeah, you would, simple to detail that. When I was introduced to the liquid back in 2006 on a retrofit job in Portland, Oregon, we had a lot of weird concrete and varying substrates. And so the peel and sticks weren't working. We always had bubbles or couldn't get it here, but the liquid flows in there nicely. And that's where we started. The applicator at the time was using chipper brushes to go in there. The thing about the liquid is it goes everywhere. It goes on your clothes if you're not careful, but it'll go anywhere within that rough opening. So it makes it so much easier, and it doesn't go on thick. The biggest issue with peel and sticks, and I was a big peel and stick fan, was all the buildup in the rough opening, then trying to get your window set in there. And of course, back in the day, the building envelope consultant would add more, and then I wouldn't be able to get my windows in because you only have so much space between the window and the rough opening. A 1/4 inch all the way around up to 3/4 is the norm.
If you read the product data sheet for Fast Flash and the product data sheet for joint and seam filler, it'll tell you how big the cracks can be for the Fast Flash and when you need to move to a pre-treatment with the joint and seam filler, and how to deal with those splits.
Yeah, and I just put my contact info, email address in the chat as well. So if you want to contact me offline, I'll be happy to help you.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dan. All right, Ian Robertson.
Hi there. Yeah, I've got a weird application of a house which we're making the whole basement waterproof because it's below the flood control level. And we don't anticipate that it's going to see water, but if it did, we need to make sure it's waterproof for the basement. Most of it, we can add a blindside waterproofing by adding a wall inside the existing basement wall. but there's one bit because of an elevator shaft clearance, we don't really have enough room for 6 inches worth of something else. So I was hoping to find a negative side waterproofing product that would work for that. And it sounds like you might be able to do so. I'd otherwise only heard of a Coster system. It was for masonry for doing this kind of thing.
Well, I'm going to pass this on, but I'm first going to give a preliminary comment. Even though we support it as an air barrier for negative side, and it will withstand water on the negative side, we don't promote it for something that's going to receive a constant head of water or likely to receive a constant head. However, if nothing else is out there, it might work. But I'll hand it over to Kimball.
Yeah, the question is that I have for you is, you're wanting to put something waterproof on the wall such that if there was a flood, you would create a swimming pool in your basement, or the other way?
Other way.
Okay, because we have had people make swimming pools out of Fast Flash and Cat 5 on OSB.
Deliberately or inadvertently?
Just so you know, no, they did it on purpose. We didn't recommend it, and we still don't promote it, but they did it on purpose, and it's been several years, and it's still functioning. So anyway, all that said, yeah, it's, as Paul said, we wouldn't want a significant head pressure on it. I don't know what there was a report that Paul mentioned a while back that might give you some numbers in there from that study, but I don't have them memorized, unfortunately. But I mean, it is waterproof, and it is intimately bonded to all those little peaks and valleys things that I talked about in between the fingers, and all of that, and it has great adhesion to those sorts of substrates. So as Paul said, hell, it might just work, but I wouldn't, that wouldn't be something that we would go around spending a lot of time promoting. That, that's a pretty tough application, that negative side. But if like you said, if you got nothing else, this would be a heck of a lot better than nothing.
Well, yeah, totally. And there don't seem to be many things that exist for this. So that's what I'm kind of like, what other things might exist that might work also. So yeah, I'll look at that study. That'll be good.
Yeah.
And did you say it was a small area?
Yeah, it's like because of an elevator shaft, we can't add the packing wall to it. So it's like 5 or 6 feet worth of a wall. That it's a good concrete wall there, but we can't guarantee that there was a waterproofing membrane built outside of it. And because it's an archaeological site, we can't dig and find out. So need to add something inside. We just don't have enough room for a good thing inside.
And the fast, I'm not a chemist, but the Fast Flash has more of the STP resin in it. In other words, I think it's a more robust material, but it's not sprayable. And that's, the Cat 5 it needs to be sprayable and has less challenge to it on the field of the wall. But for what you're doing, I believe I'd coat it with Fast Flash. Again, no assurances, but I think it'd be worth the extra effort to trowel that on.
Yeah, I think that sounds like something that's sounding kind of plausible. So yeah, definitely good to look up a little bit more for it.
Yeah, and the Fast Flash, we do have a roller grade. You always need the trowel grade and the seam, but it comes in two gallon pails, where the Cat 5 comes in a 5 gallon pail. So just you have a couple of choices there.
Cool. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, Ian. Okay, next up is Travis.
Hi, everyone. I'm curious about the research that's been done regarding health and safety, skin contact, off-gassing, fumes, and it's good that it's intimately bonded to the building, but I don't really want it to be intimately bonded to me or people I'm working with or the homeowners. So thanks.
Yeah, it was designed. The reason they didn't have any solvents or isocyanates in it is that they didn't want their workers, when it was first developed, they didn't want the workers being contaminated. They also didn't want, if they were doing restoration in occupied places, they didn't want the tenants to be, bad primers and stuff like that, or any VOCs. So it's pretty healthy. We're living building challenge. It's 99% solid, so there's not going to be any off-gassing. I did a above grade on Bainbridge Island, Washington. I did above grade basement, and we coated it. And I was doing a presentation later after the project, and it was a restoration. And I said the material smells like when you have a brand new shower curtain, you open up, it smells like that. And one of the superintendents said, no, it doesn't. He goes, I can barely smell it. Don't you remember being in that basement? You can barely smell anything. In fact, if you do open up a brand new shower curtain, that's more pungent than our materials are. It won't stick to your skin. It does love hair because your skin has oil on it. So, you know, other than that, we tell people in our trainings that if you do get some on you, and we recommend wearing nitrile gloves or anything like that, and don't wear your favorite Seahawks jersey, but because you will get it on you. But wipe your hands with isopropyl alcohol or something like that. Don't go wash your hands in water because it is moisture cured.
Yeah, good stuff, Pat. The isopropyl alcohol that Pat just mentioned, by the way, 70% isopropyl alcohol, 30% water is rubbing alcohol that you buy in a drugstore. Okay, so it's pretty mild in its how it affects the human skin. But yes, I would just further say the cure byproduct, and that's the 1% that other than the 99 that Pat mentioned a second ago, is the cure byproduct is methanol, methyl alcohol. So you see, it's these relatively innocuous alcohols that are the cure byproducts, as opposed to some of the urethanes that Pat mentioned, where isocyanates are used, and isocyanates are nasty human sensitizers involved in all urethanes, by the way. So very innocuous. Pat mentioned some of the testing that's been done. Probably the most, or the labels, probably the most aggressive from the standpoint of getting to know everything that is in a product is the declare label. Declare requires pretty much the manufacturer to tell you the formulation of the product. And there are a lot of manufacturers out there that are refusing, that are dragging their feet and just not willing to do it. But Prosoco has the declare labels on, I think, pretty much all of our guard products. So I think we're there, and I hope that answers your question, Travis.
Awesome. Thanks, Travis. Thanks, guys. So I think we're to our last question now, and this is a question from Jeff. So Jeff, please fire away.
Outside of CMU, do you guys have a product? I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there that's been doing it for a while, but I've got a retrofit that I'm doing. The first floor is going to be with inside the envelope, but it's half underground. We got to dig it out. It's a very damaged CMU foundation. But once we get all the repairs done and all the helical piers underneath the bad slab and all the other stuff, I need to seal the outside of this thing. And I was wondering if you guys had a product that did something like that.
Is it going to be below grade?
Half of it will, yes. It's all going to be behind some sort of exterior insulation. We haven't decided which yet. More than likely, like a rigid rock wool or something like that, or mineral wool. But it's going to be half underground, half out.
Well, Pat, I think probably how that's normally done is they use a below grade material, in the below grade portion, and use I believe they use our in the above grade portion. What do you think?
Right. Yeah, we would interface. The below grade would come up 4 to 6 inches above grade, and then we would lap over them 2 to 4 inches, and that's the normal. We're not rated for below grade, and we say it in our literature, not rated for below grade. Have people used it below grade? I cannot confirm nor deny that, but I would recommend below grade products, and then come back to us. We can tell you what we've tested. We don't have any compatibility issues with most of them, but we've tested quite a few and have great adhesion.
So you're saying do the below grade and then overlap it with your product over the top of it?
Yeah, ours would overlap on them.
Right. Okay, cool. Thank you.
You bet.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Well, I think we've made it to the end of the questions here. So, Dave, Pat, and Paul, do you have any thing that you want to add before we close things up here?
Just really appreciate everyone's time, and I'm in the office, but these other guys are out in the field, and together with we've got lots of people across the country, and the motto is "US a project." I challenge you to ask around. I challenge you to find anybody who'll give you field service like these guys will.
Yep. Thank you.
I agree. I thank you everyone for your time and attention and a great question. Just one thing, Travis, that I thought of regarding your question is there's been a couple times where condo associations have gathered together to discuss which product they're going to use here or there, other things, and people have literally taken in a 2x4 or 2x6 or whatever with wet coated Cat 5 or fast splash on it, put it down in the middle of the table, didn't tell anyone until half an hour into the meeting and asked the question, does anyone smell anything? And no one noticed anything, but this stuff is still wet and still cured, and that's how non-invasive and safe for humans stuff is. Hopefully we answered everyone's questions. Really appreciate your time. I know that everyone put our contact information in the chat, and if you don't have it, I'm sure there's a way to get it through Zach. So happy to have been engaged in this conversation today, and wish you all a happy day.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Pat. Thanks, Paul. Also, thank you to Nicole Lauderdale and Darcy Boyle for helping to make this happen. They're both at Prosoco as well. Big thank you to Prosoco for their support of Passive House Accelerator and this fantastic event today. And thank you all of you who came to be part of this event. We really, really appreciate you being here and sparking a really fantastic conversation and discussion. So please enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next time. See you guys.